New evidence of the Saudi Crown Prince's possible involvement in Jamal Khashoggi's disappearance as the Washington Post publishes his last article warning of threats to the media. How much of a threat are journalists to Arab governments? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hazem Seeker. The case of missing Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi has shocked and captivated the world as information trickles out over his disappearance and alleged murder inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Beyond the gruesome details, at the core of this story is a journalist who may have paid the ultimate price for what he wrote and reported. Khashoggi had warned that Saudi Arabia could never be a democracy under the current Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He highlighted the plight and struggles of journalists in his country. He said there was no space for free speech, with journalists and intellectuals often jailed for expressing their views. Now, the Washington Post published what they call Jamal Khashoggi's last article, saying they have accepted the fact that he will not return safely. In it, Khashoggi says Arab governments have been given free rein to continue silencing the media at an increasing rate. These governments, whose very existence relies on the control of information, have aggressively blocked the internet. They have also arrested local reporters and pressured advertisers to harm the revenue of specific publications. The Arab world is facing its own version of an iron curtain, imposed not by external actors, but through domestic forces vying for power. Khashoggi's words and what may have happened to him inside the Saudi consulate highlight the threats to journalists and media freedom. So far this year, 57 journalists have been killed around the world. According to Reporters Without Borders, the Middle East is the most dangerous region in the world for journalists. The World Press Freedom Index ranks several countries in the region as having some of the worst human rights violations when it comes to censoring journalism. This includes Saudi Arabia, Syria, Turkey, Iraq, Iran, and Egypt. And there are at least 159 journalists in prison around the world, a majority of them in the Middle East. Well, let's bring in our guests now to talk more about this. Joining us via Skype from London is Dr. Saad al-Faqih, a Saudi dissident who heads up the opposition group Movement for Islamic Reform in Arabia. In Vienna, we have Ravi Prasad, Director of Advocacy with the International Press Institute. And in London, also on Skype, David Hurst, Editor-in-Chief of Middle East Eye. Good to have you all with us. David Hurst, if I could start with you. As far as the latest we're hearing on the investigation, in as much as there is any sort of information, because the Turks are certainly keeping their cards close to the vest on this. What do you make of the latest developments on what they found inside the Saudi consulate and in the Consul General's home, and what direction is this going in?
Well, at the moment, it's going on the outskirts of Istanbul to Belgrade Forest and the woodland in Gazi neighborhood. The CCTV has traced the movements of one of the vans that was registered to the consulate on diplomatic plates. The woodland itself is a bit of a CCTV black spot, but they've caught the van, the same van, coming out of the area, and they're now combing the forests for Jamal Khashoggi's remains. They've also said they've found evidence from inside the consulate general itself. They've been searching the grounds and also the consul's house. They haven't released the contents of the tapes, although they've told journalists like me and others about it, but I haven't actually listened to the tapes myself. That may follow. And they're trying to put maximum pressure on Washington and also on bin Salman, who are probably now in a state of panic because so many details have actually been released, documented details, exactly who the 15 were, the fact that they were 7 of them belonged to his close bodyguard, a special protection unit. The fact that these characters had turned up in London on March the 8th, and also later in April in France, and who they were and what they were doing. The details of the forensic doctor, the pathology specialist who cut Khashoggi's body up while he was still alive. An awful lot of detail has come out. The counter-narrative, one is that it never took place, that Jamal walked out within 20 minutes. That has never been proved. And now another one that, yes, there was a murder, but it wasn't done or ordered by bin Salman himself, which anyone who knows about the place and what has actually happened since he came to power and became the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia is a complete nonsense.
What is the thinking then, David, behind the way Turkey is handling all of this? Because we heard President Trump's comments that were reported that he suggested the Turks have declined to share their evidence with U.S. intelligence agencies. Trump himself saying we want to hear this tape if it exists, to use his words. Does this reluctance suggest that the Turkish government is looking for some sort of accommodation with Saudi Arabia and the United States, given the fact that these are two important powers that they don't want to rupture their relationship with?
Well, I think what Turkey is doing is trying to exert the maximum amount of pressure through the media and through public opinion on the Oval Office. I'm not saying America, I'm just specifically saying the guy in charge of the White House. The man that he chose to be really his protege in the Middle East, Crown Prince bin Salman. That's the object of what Turkey is trying to do. I think quite a lot of evidence is stacking up. It's true they haven't released it yet, but that will just be probably a matter of time. There's also some degree of corroboration from other sources. It's not complete, of course, but it's there, and it's got nothing to do with the Turks. And that is a report that was leaked to the New York Times that the American Secret Services had intercepted conversations, and they believed that there was a plot to kidnap or abduct Khashoggi. That's one. The second one is a report that has filtered through from the British intelligence services that morphine was used after the screams were heard, after Jamal Khashoggi's fingers were cut off, to pacify him. How they got that detail, how they know about that, I don't know, but that's not coming from the Turks.
Dr. Saad al-Faqih, the fact that the Saudis have up to this point delivered no sort of formal explanation for this, and the Trump administration hasn't really shown any rush to give one as well. What do you read into that, especially given that this leaking of information is continuing to trickle out through the Turkish media?
The Saudis are known now. When I say the Saudis, I mean Mohammed bin Salman and his team. They are known now to be the culprits. They are responsible for this crime. And they wanted, in liaison with Trump and Pompeo, to create a story which absolves Mohammed bin Salman. Now, he wanted to release that 2 days ago when he planned to admit responsibility in order to absolve himself and put it on somebody else. Now, the problem is information kept coming from the Turks in a way which would falsify his report. So he was stuck. He needs now to wait for the Turks to finish in order for his created report to fit with the Turks' information. Now, for his bad luck, the information coming from the Turks are encircling his neck and are proving more and more his responsibility. And he is not going to do it, whether by waiting or by releasing a report now. So that is why he's getting time in releasing the report, but at the same time, he is getting in trouble because he's delaying the report.
Ravi Prasad, as you've been hearing all of this, it's pretty clear as well that we haven't heard, we haven't got to the bottom of the full facts of what happened here. But we mentioned the Washington Post in the introduction there, and how they have published what they say is Khashoggi's last article. So the indication there is they've drawn their own conclusions about this now as far as Mr. Khashoggi's fate. What message do you think that sends for press freedom, not just in the Arab world, but as a whole?
Good question, Hazem. What at IPI, what we feel is this disappearance and alleged murder of Mr. Jamal Khashoggi is a clear message from a regime which does not tolerate any kind of criticism, that with impunity they will go around and silence critics. And if this happens, and this is the first incident, we will see other authoritarian regimes following the same path, and the Western world remaining silent because of the business deals they have with Saudi Arabia and these authoritarian regimes. So it's a very scary message that has come across. But we also hope that because of this incident, and as you correctly said in the introduction, that people are now looking forward to getting more information, people are eager to know, and there's pressure. So building on Saudi Arabia as well as the United States, which is a close ally of Prince Mohammed bin Salman, there is a hope in our hearts that this will help us promote press freedom. There will be some reaction to this murder, and we'll be able to build a campaign where we can ensure that press freedom is expanded. Things change in the Arab world, and not just in the Arab world, but around the world, where more and more authoritarian regimes are using physical intimidation, psychological intimidation, and legal intimidation to silence journalists.
You mentioned Western governments there, Ravi. Is the credibility of US democracy at stake here as well, given the way that they have responded to this?
The US democracy is very vibrant. If you see, on the one hand, we have the president and his cabinet supporting the Saudi Arabian government, but on the other hand, there is a free media. We have the Washington Post, we have the New York Times, we have the Los Angeles Times, and many others in the United States which do not fear the government. In spite of attacks on them, personal attacks on journalists by the president himself, they are chugging along. They are taking up the cause. And without them, this issue would not have reached the stage. So in the Western media, in the Western world, media still enjoys a lot of freedom, which I fear may go down if people like Mr. Trump continue to attack journalists, continue to call any criticism as fake news.
David Hurst, how would you assess the current state of media freedom, such as it is in the Arab world? Is it better or worse than 2011 and the events of the so-called Arab Spring?
Much worse. What we've got is a very vicious counter-revolution. And a real clampdown on the sort of reporting that Al Jazeera did in 2011 in Egypt. The situation, dictatorship has become, I suppose, modernized. Whenever you put a report that you know to be true out, it's immediately surrounded by in the Arab world, they call it electronic insects, false stories, false leads, people trying to take you down, trying to denigrate you. Completely the opposite. It immediately surrounds anything that you put up, and it's designed, absolutely designed, to mislead. For instance, when I originally put my story up about Jamal being dragged out of the Consul General's office with the consul there. This is before I'd heard the tapes and the comments that he made, oh, please go and do that somewhere else. What happened was a whole number of counter stories appeared in other mainstream publications saying, no, this is all rubbish. I know that Jamal is alive and well, and he's in Riyadh, and you're all going to be extremely stupid and feels, look extremely silly because he's actually alive. The Turks are absolutely convinced that he never emerged from the building alive, and they've been saying that really from day one. So that's the atmosphere. What you've got is governments that openly do not believe in free speech or in democracy. They say the Arab world is not ready for it, and they say this absolutely publicly, suppressing even basic reporting. The last two paragraphs of Jamal's marvelous posthumous column really point out to what he was actually trying to achieve. What he wanted was for Western publications to be published in Arabic. And that's not, he wasn't trying to increase the circulation of Western publications like the Washington Post and the New York Times, but he was trying to introduce the Arab world to what he thought was the best free journalism. And that's really what he was about. He really wanted to improve the understanding of the Arab world, not from a sort of factional point of view, not from an Islamist point of view, or to sell a particular line or a party, but just to give them free information. And he said the Arab world needs a modern version of the old transnational media so that citizens can be informed about global events. That really was his mission. More important, we need to provide a platform for Arab voices. And in part, that is a small, very, very small part of what Middle East Eye is doing and what Al Jazeera is doing as well. But Jamal wanted to increase that. He really believed in it. And he was very, very serious and determined to set this up. Now, if this is set up as a result of his death, a real platform, real information, which isn't immediately taken down or blocked or surrounded by false news, then I think something would have happened that is a real improvement on the situation at the moment. I don't think this will succeed. I don't think the counter-revolution will succeed. But by God, is it a rough and bumpy journey.
Well, speaking of Arab voices, let's turn back to Dr. Saad al-Faqih on this. How concerned are you about the message that all of this sends to dissidents like yourself, and for the future of different voices in the Arab world and of free speech?
We always understood that the regime does not tolerate dissent inside and outside the country, and they work very hard in order to eliminate us, either eliminate us physically or eliminate us through other means, like character assassination or forcing Western governments to convince them that we are terrorists, we are linked to terrorist groups, and other means of elimination. Fortunately, they did not succeed. I would surprise you with my answer that this incident, although it is a very bad incident, it is going to be somehow useful in reversing the table on the Saudis. Now, instead of them feeling comfortable that they have done this and they will do more and more of this sort of action because of the huge global response to that.
So you believe this may be a turning point then?
It is going to be a turning point, not only on Mohammed bin Salman, it's going to be a turning point on the whole region. And probably it could be almost like the assassination of Crown Prince of Austria in the First World War. That will bring huge consequences for Mohammed bin Salman, Mohammed bin Zayed, al-Sisi in Egypt, and will make the Saudi government in deep trouble in front of the West, in front of its own people, because Mohammed bin Salman will not be able to get rid of this problem. Now, the West knows all the details. I would probably disagree slightly with David. The West knows all the details. They have their own information and intelligence. And that's why the Congress are adamant that Jamal is killed and he has been dismembered, and the order has been given from Mohammed bin Salman. I would not expect Congress members to speak with this full confidence without having a clear-cut clear picture from their own intelligence. And that's why Trump decided yesterday not to share intelligence information with the Congress. Now he's going that far to protect Mohammed bin Salman. But fortunately, the tide is not in his favor. And because the West knows all the details, even before the Turks finish their work on their forensic and legal investigation, because the West knows the story, I think the West is extremely embarrassed, and it is in a position to do something to clear the way for it to behave properly in the future by removing Mohammed bin Salman. I would not expect the Western governments to be able to accept Mohammed bin Salman in this position, neither king nor crown prince, not even allowing him to be free after this incident.
Dr. Saad, I want to put to you the point that David made a little bit earlier, that the forces of counter-revolution, as he calls them in the Arab world, are formidable. You were saying that this is a turning point. What do you say to those who argue that this people will eventually forget about all of this at some point, because people's memories are short, and eventually something else will occupy the public's mind? What do you say to people who say that, and that in the end it won't make a huge difference?
The counter-revolution looks formidable, but they are actually relying on a tiger of paper. Now, the current structure of those three governments, Mohammed bin Zayed, Mohammed bin Salman, and the Sisi, all depends on Mohammed bin Salman. Now, Mohammed bin Salman can survive alone. He does not need bin Zayed or Sisi. But neither Sisi nor Mohammed bin Zayed can survive without the full support of Mohammed bin Salman, and they cannot survive with his own eagerness to help them. So if we remove from Mohammed bin Salman from the picture, and even the royal family cannot regain its own aura before Mohammed bin Salman. So the whole counter-revolution will be in great trouble, and we would easily see another wave of counter revolution. How it's going to what is the scenario? God knows. But I think it's all to do with this weak link, which is Mohammed bin Salman.
Ravi Prasad, I'll give what's probably going to be the last word to you on this. At the start of the program, we gave what was not a very pretty picture of the state of free press in the Middle East and elsewhere in the world. What can international organizations like yours continue to do to try to counter that?
Hazem, before I go there, let me just say that after the Arab Spring, we were hoping things will change, but nothing changed. What we saw is that the situation has become worse. Look at Egypt. We have serious problems there. Scores of journalists are in prison, and our own Mohammed, has been in prison for 667 days, and he's not been tried. In Turkey, 167 journalists are in prison. So what is happening is, in this part of the world, in the Arab world, the regimes are trying to control the narrative. And as Mr. Khashoggi's posthumous article talks about, information and misinformation, disinformation, that's exactly what they want to do. They want to control the narrative. They want to control the information. So they use all the tactics to have complete control over what information is available. And counter-revolution requires information to trickle down to people so that they can join the revolution. Now, what international organizations can do, like ours, in terms of press freedom, is we can bring pressure on the governments. We've been working with the government, with Al Jazeera and other partners, on bringing pressure on Egypt to release all the journalists. We have been campaigning for release of journalists in Turkey. We got journalists released in Nigeria and other places. So international organizations can bring in the technical support. We can support you. We can support media organizations in fighting for the space that is required to report fearlessly and fair.
That is going to have to be the last word. Thanks very much for being with us, all three of you. Dr. Saad El-Faqih, Ravi Prasad, and David Hurst. Thanks very much for being on Inside Story. And thank you for watching. As always, you can see the program again anytime by going to our website, aljazeera.com. And for more discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle there is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Hazem Sika, and the whole team here, bye for now.